Buddy, I know we're not doing so hot. The first loss in what feels like forever. Technically, it's the first loss in 3 weeks at Citi Field. The Mets had an 8-game winning streak there at home, a 13-1 record, and that falls short today as the bats fell short in that 9th inning rally, losing today's game by a final score of 4-3. Folks, we have so much to get into in today's matchup between the Mets and the Diamondbacks. A lot of frustration in this one. The rally fell just short that we saw there in the 9th inning. And before we have everybody and their mother come in the chat and everybody watch on replay say the following: Wardy, why was Brandon Waddell taken out after 4 innings? Wardy, Ryan Stanek single-handedly cost the Mets again. Wardy, Chris Davinsky shouldn't have even been pitching beyond 1 inning. While you can make all those rightful arguments, and we're going to talk about all of them in today's show, don't you guys worry, this falls first and foremost on the offense. You can't expect the Mets to come out and win a ball game when they have bases loaded with 1 out and don't score in the first off of Corbin Burnes. You can't expect the Mets, who went over 10 with runners in scoring position and left 13 on base, to still be that same team that wins comfortably in the end. Every time that they do this, they are setting themselves up for failure, and they have been able to get around this quite a bit because they've still been able to manage that one big hit to have themselves having that key difference maker. Wasn't the case tonight. They fell too little too late there and trying to get the rally going, and that was all she wrote there in this matchup. So we're going to break it all down inning by inning to each and every one of you. Come one, come all. Thank you guys kindly for chiming in. I greatly appreciate it. To the latest WardyNYM post-game show presented by SeatGeek, BetUS TV, and Mando. Moonshadow with the $10 holla. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Moonshadow says, when San Diego Soto didn't come through in his last at-bat, I knew we were going to be losing this game. Snake bites are hard to recover from. They are hard to recover from. And Juan Soto had his fair share of frustration for us Mets fans again today, because when you take, not when you take, but when you're swinging 3-0, when you have not been locked in the way that Juan Soto has been still pressing, pulling baseballs more often than not, I'm not exactly sure what the thought process was there, nor was I sure or really happy to see Mark Vientos, again, my guy, one of the key offensive standouts today. All he needed to do was keep the bat on his shoulders, and he swung multiple times on sliders, not even close to the zone. Again, there were a lot of at-bats that were beyond frustrating in this matchup, and I'm not going to sit here and nitpick one individual person over the other as much, and I'm not going to sit here and say that Carlos Mendoza did all of these things wrong today. When you look at how Ryan Stanek lost this one for the Mets and went in direct hand with a lot of very bad, very unfortunate soft contact. Now, Stanek wasn't perfect, and we're going to get into what is working wrong, not in his favor in today's matchup. But like I said, there's a lot to get into in this one, everybody. So make sure to smash that like and subscribe button as you first chime in. Should you guys enjoy our Mets content, win, lose, or draw, we come at you with live post-game shows after every single game throughout the course of the season, throughout the entirety of the 162. And that's why we built such an awesome platform here over the past couple years. So again, happy to have you all in here. Not happy to be breaking down this ball game, but it's easier to allow these things to at least settle, knowing that the Mets are where they are right now, and knowing that this was yet another game. And I think we can all agree with this. It wasn't about the Arizona Diamondbacks looking like a better team, as it was the Mets out-Metsing themselves. They did not look good in this matchup today, the Mets, and they have themselves to blame. This was not one of those games where I saw the Diamondbacks come out guns a-blazing and, we got ourselves a problem, folks. No, this had 10 times more to do with the Mets shooting themselves in the foot, not taking advantage with runners on base early and often in this game against Corbin Burnes, allowing Burnes to then get in a groove for the ensuing innings, and allowing Corbin Burnes, who was not overwhelming at all with his stuff today, to record his first victory on the season. And this is yet another game, everybody, where the Mets lose in a one-run fashion, the same way they did over 2 weeks ago, where Justin Hageman came in and gave the Mets solid innings of work after Huascar Brosman spot started the Mets in that series finale. Fast forward a couple weeks later, Brandon Waddell makes his Mets debut, his first outing at the major league level since 2021, and Brandon Waddell was absolutely nails, far from the Mets' biggest problem in this matchup, yet it came down to their offense being a little too fickle, and we can't even say the ump wasn't on the Mets' side, because there were a lot of borderline calls, borderline strike calls that went in the Mets' favor, especially in the first half of this ball game. Say what you will in the respective areas to what bothered you most, and we're going to talk about it all, I promise, guys. But this was a true collective effort by the Mets today, which led to their demise in this one. No doubt about it. And no, the Mets are not going to be DFAing Ryan Stanek. I know it's frustrating to see him not do well in 3 consecutive outings, but today had a lot more to do with Ryan Stanek having piss poor luck on his side, had some soft contact leading to some unfortunate runs in favor of the Diamondbacks. But what we can critique Ryan Stanek on today is that he wasn't able to locate his fastball, and even while he was consistently pumping north of 99 on the gun, it was flat as all hell. That's why he was not getting the swing and miss we otherwise like to see with Ryan Stanek. He was not getting the bite that we have seen against a very disciplined Arizona Diamondbacks lineup that we know is one of the better offenses in Major League Baseball, everybody. The Diamondbacks entered tonight's game with a top 5 offense in Major League Baseball, all without Ketel Marte, arguably their top player, with the exception of Corbin Carroll, because he's been out with injury. So, again, you're not going to win every game, but I will say this. I was expecting the Mets, if they were going to lose this ball game, to lose it in a fashion that had far more to do with maybe their pitching getting further exposed. And while, yes, Chris Davinsky didn't do us too many favors in his second inning out there, the Mets fundies didn't help too much either. So this has a lot more to do with the fundamentals of the Mets today, as well as a runner in scoring position woes. And that is first and foremost where the blame is mostly on in this ball game. So I understand frustrations in other areas, but that is the core of it, and that will continue to be the core of it for the Mets as of now. They're just shooting themselves in their own foot. When you think of all the previous Mets losses, from going all the way back to their loss to the Miami Marlins, the Mets have not lost one single game since then where they did not look like a team that probably should have won the ball game, but again, shot themselves in the foot, and that's why they ultimately lost. This is not a slight on the Diamondbacks, nor is this a slight on previous competition, the Nationals, etc., but at any point against the Nationals and now against the Diamondbacks, have you felt uncomfortable as a Mets fan that you think the Mets aren't the better team? We all know they're the better team. They're clearly looking like the better team, but we also know when they're having their own hiccups and when they're snapping out of what's been a great run for them. And while I fully anticipate and expect the Mets to continue to play great baseball and hopefully salvage a series tomorrow with a big victory with Kodai Senga towing the rubber in a day game against the New Jersey native and Zach Gallen, before we get there, let's get into everything that transpired in this ball game right here, right now. CD, thank you so much for the $5 haul. I appreciate that. CD says in the chat, even when our Mets lose, they always go down fighting. They do, and that is that never say die mentality. That is in part the Carlos Mendoza mentality that's been adopted really since he's been manager for the most part. So love him or hate him, he has definitely been a positive influence, and today you can nitpick things all you want, but Mendoza isn't going anywhere, as much as some of you guys may love to see it happen. Jack, thank you so much for the $2 holla. Jack says, we may have lost, but I caught a ball. I'm glad you caught a ball, and I hope you had a great time at the game, Jack. Unfortunate game for you to attend, but at least you got to get a baseball before everything wrapped up. I can give you $760 million a reason why we lost. That's good wordplay, Tingus. Thank you so much. It's almost like you have a critique to say on Juan Soto. Who would have thought? I also apologize to everybody. I realize I look redder and darker in my camera today. That's just based on the lighting. I'll actually change it right now if I can, because I don't know why it looks the way that it does right there. Just give me 1 second. Let's fix this puppy for you real quick. Let's just add some brightness in here. Okay. There we go. That's a little too bright. There we go. That looks better. Let's get this camera to focus. Okay, we're gonna just roll with the punches there. That's fine. Billy Dottie with the $2 holla. Thank you, Billy. Billy says, which Torrens was there instead of Alvarez? Am I crazy? I understand the critiques as well, and I can't completely say no that I wouldn't have liked Torrens there late in the game like that, because Alvarez was a little jumpy, and you could tell that that matchup was uncomfortable for him. But at the same time, how much better would have Torrens been? Pardon me. How much better would Torrens have been? Absolutely ice cold off the bench there in a pressure cooker situation. Not that he hasn't stepped up before, because we know he has, but still, I'm not really looking at that as like the end-all be-all. The end-all be-all in this ballgame, everybody, is the Mets not scoring a single runner when they had 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position and left 13 on base. That is what this ballgame comes down to, first and foremost. Let me try to get this focused just a little bit more, everybody. There we go. I think we're good now. Okay. All right, guys, let's break down this ball game. This wasn't a fun one. I'm not going to take up too much of your time tonight as we have a quick turnaround tomorrow, and I believe I'll probably have a video either dropping in the AM or sometime in the evening separate from tomorrow's post-game show, so be on the lookout for it. Hit that like and subscribe button as you come in, and as always, thank you so much for the support, everybody. Sorry, but I'm a DBacks fan. I mean, you have nothing to be sorry about other than the fact that we're not happy with you right now. We really thought we were going to have this game. We thought we were going to have the series in the bag today, and it happened. Diamondbacks prevail. So let's get into everything that transpired in this one, everybody. Let's see. I was thinking you had no makeup. I get red really fast, especially because one, the room I'm working in gets hot because I have 10 things running at once when I'm editing and doing these things throughout the entire course of the baseball game. And secondly, as soon as I get animated, good, bad, or indifferent, the cheeks go rosy red right away. So you're going to get what you're going to get, guys. But as we enter tonight's ball game, we found out some very unfortunate news that we're going to further break down in content tomorrow, and that is that Danny Young is the latest reliever to be added to, yes, the injured list. And the Mets are without both their southpaw options, the bullpen right now, and Brooks really isn't returning any sooner than potentially June or July. So having said that, everybody, the Mets are now going to need to figure out what will their immediate bullpen decisions be, because on the interim, they decided to go with Brandon Waddell to be innings eater today, and Brandon Waddell pitched and played so well today that unless the Mets want to deviate away from Waddell because of the fact that he ate 4 innings, and maybe they decide to send him down for a couple days when they know he wouldn't be available, and then bring him back up when he can be a fresh arm again, I'm not opposed if they do that, but if they keep him on the roster, today was an exact reason as to why, everybody. We're going to get into Waddell, what works so well for him. But outside of that, the Mets don't really have a lot of lefty options that they're loving right now in AAA. So things are going to get interesting really fast with Chris Davinsky, who was actually their first offseason move this past offseason, made his Mets debut today, had a strong first inning, a not-so-strong second inning. Some Mets fans wanted Edwin Diaz in there when we were down by 1. I knew they were never doing that when we have no off days for the next, I think, 13 days or so. The Mets have very little rest. They have a lot of baseball to be had in a short period of time leading into the month of May. So I was not expecting Diaz to come in down 1 run in this ball game, as much as some fans maybe want to see it happen. So that didn't really bother me either, but I'll get into what bothered me in this ball game. And it starts here, everybody, in the first inning. You got Corbin Burns towing the rubber there for the Diamondbacks, and we have Mr. Huascar Brosman as a spot starter towing the rubber here for the Amazons. And as we see, everybody, Brosman comes in, and Pat, thank you so much for the $5 haul. I appreciate that. Pat says Waddell and Brazo A+. Davinsky was Jekyll and Hyde. Stanek seems like his early 2024 self. Mets offense outside of Lindor, Taylor, and Vientos was a bust. Yep, again, there are a lot of things that were frustrating for sure in this one, everybody. And Carlos Mendoza did just reaffirm, as a matter of fact, that Danny Young may be facing Tommy John surgery. They'll have confirmation the next couple of days. But needless to say, if you're hearing that AJ Minter is going to be potentially having season-ending surgery, if you're hearing that Danny Young is potentially going to have Tommy John surgery, that means that those things, barring drastic changes from, say, second or third opinions, are going to more than likely happen. So do not anticipate Danny Young and AJ Minter back anytime soon. Right now, it looks like the Mets, in a snap of a finger, in just a 48-hour span, have lost their 2 lefty options in their bullpen. How are they going to be able to combat this? That's what we'll talk about briefly tonight, as well as further breaking down for you guys tomorrow in separate content. But getting back in this one, I apologize for all the tangents, folks. Brosman gets in with this one, and right away, he would get a flyout on Tawa, who was leading things off there at second base for the Diamondbacks. Nice catch by Tyrone Taylor. Got a bit more carry than we all were initially anticipating. From there, we saw Corbin Carroll strike out and Randall Grichuk strike out. So great first inning of work there from Huascar Brosman. Sets up Francisco Lindor as Lindor continues his leadoff Lindor himself, this time with a double. Lindor's 5th double on the season, and I believe now Lindor has, he has 6 home runs, 5 doubles. I want to say Lindor has at least 1 triple, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, Lindor is in the double-digit category for extra base hits this season. Not shocked to see that. Soto then with a line out because, of course, Alonso with a walk, Vientos with a walk, so it's bases loaded and 1 out for Starling Marte, who got this start in a righty-righty matchup over Jesse Winker today because Marte has had solid numbers in his career against Burns. Well, today, Marte strikes out swinging, and then Jeff McNeil has a first pitch swing for a ground out, which strands the bases loaded. Greg, thank you so much for the $2 haul. I appreciate that. This fan base is brutal. What do they expect? 162-0? No, they actually expect 163-0 because they're expecting one game added just to be a blowout victory for the Mets. All jokes aside, yes, I know. And the ebbs and flows of 162, fans are going to be overreactionary. They're going to be even keeled. It just depends on who you talk to. And I understand that is what's going to happen when we cover these games on a nightly basis. But as we continue on in the second inning, everybody, we would see Mr. Naylor get on with a one-out walk, then Moreno with a strikeout, Gurriel then with a pop out. So a nice, easy 1-2-3 that we saw there, everybody, when evaluating what's going on here with Josh Naylor and the Arizona Diamondbacks. They work out of that jam unscathed. In the bottom of the second, we would see Tyrone Taylor rip a 2-out single. Tyrone Taylor with another massive day today, both defensively and offensively. Have a day, Tyrone Taylor. Sadly, the rest didn't really come along swinging the way that he did. As we get into the third, everybody, here is what starts the positive upswing for the Mets on the pitching end. The only true positive, feels like today, with the exception of Braziban, and that's Brandon Waddell. Brandon Waddell making his first start, I should say first appearance, because even when he was pitching in 2021 in Major League Baseball, he was utilized more as a reliever, if I'm not mistaken. So he was in the KBO the past 3 years, posted a 1.5 ERA and over 20 innings so far in Syracuse this season. And Brandon Waddell back-toning the rubber this time for the Amazons. He comes in and gives up a one-out single to Hampson, I believe. Then Tawa, we would see there with a strikeout, and Corbin Carroll with a ground out, and that does it for a clean inning of work. In the bottom of the third, we would see Mark Vientos rip a no-doubter that we saw to left. Marky V getting the home run heroics early and often. This one, folks, Mets have themselves an early 1-0 lead throughout the first 3 innings as Corbin Burnes is facing Mark Vientos for the first time in his career, and Mark Vientos makes him pay, as you guys can see right here, right there. Now, Vientos had some frustrating at-bats later on this ball game between his second to last at-bat that we saw where he struck out on sliders, just not even close to the zone. Should have just kept the bat on his shoulders, doing his best Vogelback impression. It would have worked well there, but again, it is what it is. I know you're not going to be hitting every single time. And then Vientos' final at-bat, too. Very unfortunate. Would have loved to see more there. Didn't get it. So either way, Mark Vientos did have one of the only home run heroics for the Mets in this matchup, leading to his player spotlight and standout. The bar was lower today. I would have loved to have not only Vientos to talk more about. I would have had something set up for Tyrone Taylor, but Tyrone didn't get the home run until the 9th inning. I was not going to be scrambling to get that set up unless the Mets rallied all the way back. So, Mark Vientos, everybody, I do just want to shed some information on him because after that home run, I think it's important to make note of the following statistics. Over Mark Vientos' last 11 games, leading up to that home run, so cut off the stat at the home run, okay? He's been batting .333 with a .386 on base and a .718 slug over his last 11 games. Now, after his final at-bats today, I'm sure he's closer there to, 300 on the average, and maybe the slug is in the 600s, but still, the point is that Vientos has been starting to find his groove, and he's been hitting so much better over the past 2 weeks than what he did to start the season. So much so that to further expand as to just how good he's looked, everybody, when evaluating these splits, take a look at this, everybody. Mark Vientos in his last 15 games up until today, 304 average, 342 on base with a 607 slug. That's good for 4 home runs. Might have included today's home run too there. 14 RBIs and 12 runs scored. So Vientos has definitely been having the offensive turnaround, and that's why I've been telling you guys. He is not playing as bad as some people are making him out to be. He's getting more and more out of his rut that we've seen the past 2 weeks, but it doesn't mean that he's going to be fantastic every time out there, obviously, and Vientos absolutely drove in one, and we know that he is one of these guys that's going to be swing and miss. We're going to probably see him look more human than what he did last year because he was riding high with 27 home runs in just over 100 games when pitchers didn't really know how to approach him, especially in that first half. Now teams are making adjustments. Mark's in a deep lineup. He needs to take advantage of pitches to hit, and he did all of that with a 94-mile-per-hour meatball, if I'm not mistaken, right down the pipe there by Corbin Burnes to Mark Vientos. So Mark did his thing, and he gave the Mets an early 1-0 lead that we saw there in the third inning. But unfortunately, that would be one of the only runs the Mets would score for the vast majority of this ball game. Because as we continue breaking down this one, everybody, let's see, that stat is skewed, and I'm sure it is ever so slightly GSU, but still, the point is that Vientos over his past 2 weeks has been batting unbelievably well versus how he started this season. That's notable, to say the least. And as we continue on from there, folks, as we get to the fourth, we would see Grichuk ground out, Suarez strikeout, Naylor then gets on with a 2-out single, Gabby Moreno as well gets on with a 2-out single, and then Lourdes Gurriel Jr. with a flyout does it there for the inning. So Brandon Waddell works out of his own mess unscathed, which then leads us to the bottom of the fourth, where Jeff McNeil gets on with a leadoff walk. Alvarez then just misses the hanging slider down the pipe. He gets under it for a fly out there to left. And then we see Acuna get on with a fielder's choice and Taylor with a fly out, and that does it. In the fifth inning, we would see Barossa there in center field strike out, Hampson with a ground out, and that's all she wrote there. A clean inning of work there that we'd see from Mr. Brandon Waddell. Then in the bottom of the fifth, Francisco Lindor with a walk, Soto with a fielder's choice as he would get to second base then on Burns' third disengagement to first base. Burns wasn't making the proper count, and that gets him to first without a problem. Alonso with a walk, and then Vientos, unfortunately, with a double play, ended it from there. As we then get on to the sixth inning, everybody, what happens in the sixth is as follows. Between the Mets and the Diamondbacks, we would see here an easy 1-2-3 for Brandon Waddell's final inning of work today. He gets a fly out on Corbin Carroll, a line out on Randall Grichuk, and a ground out on Eugenio Suarez. Now, let's first talk about why did Brandon Waddell not stay in this game longer than maybe some of you guys, or if not the majority of you guys, wanted to see. And here's exactly why. It is the following, everybody. Let's see. Every podcaster is saying many mismanages this game except Wardy. That's not entirely true, one. And secondly, I critique Mendoza plenty, but I don't think that you can look at this game and put endless blame on Carlos Mendoza when if your offense, again, goes 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position and leaves 13 on base, Carlos Mendoza can't go out there and bat himself. So I understand the criticisms as someone who definitely will be a critic when it's warranted. I'm not saying that Mendy was the best manager imaginable tonight either, but I'm saying that I think context is very important. And this would be a different situation. Whereas if the Mets offense was rolling and then they say, take out a key hitter for a pinch hitter cold and it doesn't work, or let's say they make a bullpen decision that makes no sense. You can argue Chris Davinsky coming in for another inning didn't make all that much sense in a one-run ball game. And that I agree with you guys 100%. But you weren't going to bring Edwin Diaz in that situation, which I really don't fault Mendoza for personally. And in the case of Brandon Waddell, he was coming off of 4 days rest that he had from his previous start in Syracuse. And the Mets are probably figuring out what they want to do with Brandon Waddell and if they're going to keep him on the roster. So if Waddell gets sent down tomorrow, that means that he's immediate sent down because he's not available for the next day or two, and they don't want to have him here when they could have a fresh arm. That makes endless sense. And if Brandon Waddell does stay on this team, that's because even after pitching 4 shutty for the Mets this past day, as of today, right now, at the time of recording this, it doesn't change the fact that they really like how he can perform in other reliever option roles for this Mets team. So we'll see what happens on the front of what the Mets are going to do with their lefty options in this bullpen. But I can't emphasize enough how much, in my opinion, I think in the opinions of many, this comes down to the offense not producing. When all you need to do was poke a single in the first inning, you would have scored a run or two. That's all it took. It starts there, and it's a trickle-down effect from there. But let's show some appreciation for the guy in Brandon Waddell, because he was fantastic today. 4 innings, 3 hits, 0 walks, 0 earned runs, 3 strikeouts. I think a lot of you guys would probably agree that you would like Brandon Waddell to stay on this Mets roster. And unless the Mets decide to send him down just because they want a fresh arm in the next couple games and he won't be available, I'm all for keeping Brandon Waddell on this team. Now, also, you have to wonder, do the Mets want Brandon Waddell to be this guy that comes in as a multi-A reliever for them like what we saw today? Do they want him to be potentially utilized in high leverage and say 1 to 2 inning outings if he works himself up? Or do they want him utilized more so as a starter type? Because depending on how Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns evaluate Brandon Waddell will go in direct hand with their decision-making going forward. If they want him stretched as a true starter, then naturally there's no need to have him on the roster immediately right now. But if they want him in a reliever role, that makes a lot more sense to keep him on the squad and then go from there. And no, Ryan Stanek is not going to be DFA'd, Maxwell, as much as some fans may want to see that happen. I'm going to explain here shortly as to why what Ryan Stanek did today does not warrant a DFA, but certainly does warrant criticism and warrants frustration. But we can't just go cutting guys just for the sake of cutting guys because they had, a bad outing or two. That's the equivalent of saying that the Mets should have cut Ryan Stanek after he got his tit slit by the Seattle Mariners, his former team last year in Seattle. The Mets decided to stay with Stanek, and who was one of the most reliable options for the Mets come postseason last year? It was Ryan Stanek. So again, the ebbs and flows of 162. I can understand that you get caught up in the moment. I do too as a fan, but it's very important to make note what Stanek's worth has been and what will more than likely continue to be for this Mets team. It's crazy that we could have been 23-7, I know. And that's what has me encouraged as a fan. Juan Soto still isn't doing a lick, which is frustrating to say the least, as well as this offense they only have themselves to blame, right? And each of the losses that the Mets have had, going back to that last loss against the Miami Marlins, that's the last time that the Mets lost a game where they just had nothing working. Since then, every loss the Mets have all been losses that they absolutely, you could argue, should have won the ball game, and they have themselves to blame first and foremost versus the other team playing unbelievably well. That wasn't the case in any of these matchups against the Diamondbacks or the Nationals so far. But let's talk a bit here on Brandon Waddell, everybody, before we break down more of what went wrong and then somewhat right in this ball game. And Waddell had the entire 5-pitch mix working today with the four-seam fastball at 32% of the arsenal, topping out 92 and sitting right around 91. The slider topping out 23% of the arsenal, 88 miles per hour where he topped out and sat right around 87. Sweeper, 17% of the arsenal for Brandon Waddell today, topped out 80 and sat right around 78 to 80. The sinker, 17% of the arsenal. I like his usage in this, especially. Had a 57% whiff rate there against left-handers. 92 is where he maxed out, and 91 is where he sat. And the changeup that he threw just 12% of the time, topped out 85, sat right around 84. So Brandon Waddell, folks, I'm going to say something that I don't say too often. Brandon Waddell gets a strong 9 out of 10 from your guy Wardy today, because Brandon Waddell made Mets history today. For those that are unaware, Brandon Waddell is the first Mets reliever ever in team franchise history to make his Mets debut and go out and have 4 shutty for the Mets in said debut. No other Mets reliever has ever done that for their first outing as a New York Metropolitan. So Brandon Waddell not only exceeded expectations, but he looks like he may very well be what Josh Walker wishes he could have been for this Mets team. If you guys remember Josh Walker from a couple years ago, I like the soft tossing southpaw Waddell here. I know it's not going to play up every time, but especially depending on matchups and teams like the Diamondbacks, who have hit unbelievably terrible against left-handers in particular this year, that's where a guy like Waddell can continue to thrive. So I'm not opposed to him being on this roster going forward, but we'll see what happens with the decisions that Carlos Mendoza makes leading into tomorrow. But I'm giving Waddell a strong 9 out of 10, something I don't usually do, but he's not a typical starter. He came in for his season debut today, and he was absolutely nails. He deserves endless credit, far from the guy that was an issue for the Mets today in this one. Another useless stat. Yes, GSU, it's useless if you don't care about it. No different than anything else in life that you don't care for, while the next person talking to you or is next to you in the chat certainly does. Everything's different. What's the relevance of that stat? If you're talking about what I just said regarding Waddell, it's the relevance of we're talking about Brandon Waddell, so that's why we're bringing up the relevance of it, because it's relevant right now as we talk about said player. If that's abundantly clear enough for you, I'm not entirely sure. But as we continue on, folks, Brandon Waddell exits this game after giving the Mets 4 shutty, which then leads us now to the bottom of the 6th, where after 2 outs, as Marte pops out and McNeil strikes out swinging, Alvarez would get on with a walk, and then Luis Angel Acuna, who got the start at second base again today, sadly struck out swinging for the final out there in the inning. In the top of the 7th, Josh Naylor would strike out, and then we'd see Ryan Stanek come in because Brandon Waddell would do the lefty-lefty matchup and get that final out in the inning, which was great. And unfortunately, Brandon Waddell didn't continue this inning when he should have, because everything went to shit from here. Gabby Moreno grounds out, so there's 2 outs, no on, and then Lourdes Gurriel has himself a single. But when I see a single, there's important context behind this single, everybody. This was not like, oh, he got absolutely smoked. No, it was literally a 5-hopper up the middle, and then we see a broken bat double by Jorge Barrosa, his second double of the year, killing the Mets early in the series. I've noticed that with Barrosa bombed the live here. 7-8-9, killing the Mets here, of course, and Ryan Stanek just can't get the outs. Then here comes pinch hitter Geraldo Perdomo coming in there for Garrett Hampson, and he gets himself an effing 2-strike blooper to give them a 2-1 lead. So when I tell you anything and everything that could have went wrong, everything went wrong there for Ryan Stanek and the Mets. Now, where's Ryan Stanek at fault? Let me enlighten you in case you guys didn't watch the game. Ryan Stanek was not locating well early with his fastball. He was missing location on like 4 or 5 consecutive pitches, and that was part of his demise as well in this one. Stanek's fastball topped out 99 today, close to 100, but he still didn't look like he was in position to really be dominant the way that we've seen him in other outings. He did not have that today. He did not get the same bite. He didn't get the same swing and miss. His fastball looked flat, regardless of how fast and hard he's pumping. Doesn't change the fact if they're going to be setting you up the way that, unfortunately, the Diamondbacks were ready to play. Let's see. I was the first lefty pitcher to pitch for, no, not just lefty pitcher, GSU. First Mets reliever ever to do that in their debut with the team. Ever. It's not just a lefty reliever thing either, if I'm not mistaken. But guys, continuing on this conversation, we talked about that 2-1 Arizona Diamondbacks lead, and let's see what happens from here. Because after Perdomo then promptly steals second base for 7th bag of the year, we would see Tim Tawa thankfully line out in center, and that's because Tyrone Taylor is there with the massive catch. Tyrone continues the great heroics in center for this Mets team, and they're down by 1 as we head to the bottom of the 7th. In the bottom of the 7th, here comes the southpaw Jalen Beeks, and he gives up a single to Tyrone Taylor. We love Tyrone Taylor. And then we would see shortly after that, Taylor steals his second bag of the season. Somehow, some way, you have an idiot there at second base. Oh, I apologize. CB Buckner. Let me make sure I say his name correctly, even though I think what I just said is pretty much the exact same thing. One of the worst stumps in the game currently. He must have had his eyes closed and just flipped a coin and said, you know what? Whatever lands on what we're gonna go with. He landed on heads apparently, and heads meant that Tyrone Taylor was out when he was never out and was safe by a mile. They quickly review. He's safe. By CB Buckner is not penalized anything because he has a union to back him, and we move on from there. Lindor would have pop out, and Juan Soto would have fly out sharply there to Lourdes Gurriel Jr. And then here we go, everybody. Here comes Kevin Ginkel to face Pete Alonso. Alonso gets on with a walk. All right, guys, the Mets have themselves 2 on with 2 out for Mark Vientos. And Mark Vientos had, in my opinion, his worst at-bat of the day here, and that's where he was striking out sliders, just not at all close to the zone, and he was biting from start to finish in this one. Not ideal. Eric Douglas, great member in the chat, he says, Mets will snag a good lefty at the deadline, but that's still 3 months away, which sucks for sure. And the Mets will make decisions with their bullpen prior to that, obviously. We'll talk more about that for content that drops tomorrow for you guys. I like Ramos. He 104 on the gun. He's nails. Yeah, but he's got a lot of work to do in the minor league still, for sure. Here comes Chris Stevensky, everybody, making his Mets season debut in the top of the 8th, and he gives up a ground out right away to Corbin Carroll. Then we would see Pavin Smith comes in as a pinch hitter for Grichuk, and it doesn't work. He strikes out swinging. Eugenio Suarez rips a 2-out double, his 5th double of the season for the home run leader out of the National League, and then Josh Naylor thankfully grounds out for a clean inning of work there for Chris Stevensky. As we get to the bottom of the 8th, everybody, here comes Jesse Winker pinch hitting, and he sadly flies out there to Lourdes Gurriel Jr. Jeff McNeil gets his first hit of the day, a 1-out knock that we would see on an infield dribbler that we'll gladly take. And then Francisco Alvarez, we would see strikeout swinging for the 2nd out of the inning. And then Brandon Nimmo comes in to pinch hit, and unfortunately, Brandon Nimmo would ground out there opposite field Eugenio Suarez to do it for the inning. And I have to be completely honest. I know the Mets were trying to drive in a run there, and Brandon Nimmo had a 9 RBI game, so I'm really not going to complain much about this. My only critique is that Luis Angel Acuna has shown his ability to step up in big at-bats late in ball games, what feels like every game. Why not give him the opportunity there to see what he could do, even in what is a righty-righty matchup? Was a little perplexed by that. I wasn't upset with Nimmo. I was just more so taken back as to why are we pinch hitting Nimmo here versus other situations. I really thought Acuna could potentially brought a quality at bat there. Not that Nimmo was terrible, but he's coming off cold off the bench when Buddy's had his stomach bug the past 48 hours. So calling me shocked that he wasn't producing at the end of his at bat here. As we get to the top of the 9th, everybody, we would see Gabby Moreno with a walk. Then Lourdes Gurriel Jr. rips a double, which is not ideal. So 2 on in scoring position, no out. And that sets everything up here that we would see, folks, for, yes, the Arizona Diamondbacks, as Jorge Barrosa would get a sac fly to make a 3-1. And then we'd see Geraldo Perdomo have a sac fly to make a 4-1. See all the runs that the Diamondbacks had today. They were all fickle BS. There wasn't one single run that was driven in by the Diamondbacks today that was like, oh, wow, great quality of contact with the hitting. Really not the case. Just a lot of unfortunate luck for the Mets and good situational hitting by getting these sac flies back-to-back the way that they did. If only the Mets were able to drive in runs with sac flies in the first inning, that they did anything but. But as we continue on, everybody, we get to the the bottom of the 9th inning. Tyrone Taylor leads things off against Justin Martinez, the flame-throwing reliever who's been getting closer role options lately for the D-backs given their injuries to their bullpen. Justin Martinez is one of the best relievers in all the National League. The guy's a nails. He touches 101 on the gun. He's disgustingly good, but thankfully, he didn't have his stuff at all today for whatever reason. It looked like he had a dead arm, honestly. He was just trying to chug through. He was sitting more 94, 95, just completely flat on his pitches. Tyrone Taylor takes him deep for his first home run of the season, believe it or not. Tyrone makes it a 2-run ball game, and all we're saying to ourselves is, Why do we have Chris Davinsky pitch there back-to-back innings? It could have been a one-run ball game and this game's tied. And I understand that's where the frustration comes into play. And I, like you, was most bothered there. And that is my biggest criticism towards Carlos Mendoza. If you're going to critique anything today, it's Mendy having Davinsky back-to-back when you're pushing your luck way too much against the Diamondbacks team that obviously is going to take advantage at some point. Might not be right away, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And they did that. Let's see. Who GSU? Who are we? Oh, are you talking about Marte? Yeah. I mean, Marte hit a home run yesterday. He does deserve credit for that. You guys can rag on him as all you want. And I don't love every situation he's put in, 1,000%. But when it comes to Marte, it's going to just be this constant debate until the Mets either trade him or he just kind of performs really well or he's just here as kind of a nobody. It's going to be one of those things, right? Lindor, though, gets on everybody with a walk right after Justin Martinez gives up that leadoff bomb to Tyrone Taylor. Then Juan Soto gets on with a walk because, of course, Juan gets on with a walk. He's always going to look for that. Would be nice if we could see him get the big hit, but I understand you have to take your base there in that situation. The polar bear then gets on with a hit by pitch, drills him on the hand. Thankfully, I believe Alonso's okay, but not ideal. And this is after, mind you, Ryan Thompson, this what looks like kind of a submarining, sidearm tossing right-hander there for the Diamondbacks. He hits Alonso running up and in. So it's bases loaded, everybody. Bases loaded for the Mets. They're down by 2. All they need is a single, and this ball game's tied. Just a single. Mark Vientos strikes at Sweeney. Jesse Winker grounds out, drives in a run, thinks to hit off his cleat. It kind of looked like it did, but it wasn't conclusive enough, and it's a 4-3 ball game with 2 outs. Mind you, again, all the Mets needed was a single with no outs, and this ball game would have been tied. Just like that. They couldn't get it. They could not get the big hit today. Jeff McNeil, after starting his at-bat of quality that we saw there, is intentionally walked. And also, everybody, we'll go back to in a second, but Soto's second to last at-bat was putrid, was far and away his worst of the day, in my opinion. Will never be signing up to be swinging 3-0 there. I don't care if you're Juan Soto or anybody. I know you're supposed to be swinging for the fences, but he also has been locked in. I don't know why you wouldn't take a pitch there. I just really don't understand it. Very frustrating when we need keep production from our guys and we're not getting it from specifically him right now. But Ryan Thompson intentionally walks Jeff McNeil to set up Francisco Alvarez. And I have to be honest, guys, as soon as I saw McNeil get intentionally walked, I did not think we were going to win this ball game. I'm not just saying that because we lost in the end. I did not have the confidence. I had everything set up on my templates and thumbnails like we were going to lose the ball game by then. Because Alvarez, I did not like his quality of at-bats today. I'm liking the hacks he's taking for sure, but he did not look as favorable in today's matchups against Burns and others. And Alvarez grounds out there that we saw to Eugenio Suarez, and Suarez is able to make the throw there, and that does it for the ball game. Mets go on to lose this one 4-3. They are 21-10 on the season. The Diamondbacks are 16-14, and the Mets will look to hopefully avoid their first series loss at home tomorrow with Kodai Senga towing the rubber against the veteran right-hander and Zach Gallen. Let's see. So sick and tired of Soto. Pete Alonso has been fantastic, but I'll just say this, everybody. To anyone that is genuinely sick and tired of Juan Soto, I'm telling you guys, you're going to be exhausted like his entire tenure then, because this is going to happen. You're going to have your flows, right? You're going to have a guy performing not well and a guy performing well. And right now, Juan Soto has been heading for better contact and getting on base at a good clip, but that power still has him in there. And Soto going over is more of the rare sights that never sit well with me as a fan, and that's why I really can't condone it. An 0-for-4 day with a walk, a 241 average, a 752 OPS, that just is not going to play. It is not going to get the job done. And it has really been frustrating to see when Juan Soto has cost the Mets. It hasn't happened much this season, and Soto has helped the Mets a lot with the depth of their lineup, giving Alonso more pitches a hit than ever before, and with everyone else in company. I think Soto has most certainly been a positive for this Mets team, and without him, I don't think this Mets team is off to a 21-10 record, and I'll stand by that, because Soto impacts so much on a pitcher's approach every game, more than what we realize, because all we see is Soto not hitting a home run when he hasn't hit a home run since the series against the Twins, right? But Juan Soto is going to have his critics all year long, and until he finally gets in the groove that we know he can and do, there's going to be natural frustration, and I 100% understand because I fall in that category too. But this was a collective effort by the Mets with them not hitting today, and that can't be understated. Again, when you go for 10, that's the big bugaboo right there. You leave 13 on base. So it's imperative for the Mets, who are normally not notorious for doing too well a night to a day game, especially early in the season. They're going to need to be guns blazing tomorrow against the Zach Gallen that's been underwhelming to start the season, but we know that he can certainly be better too. And in the case of what you're getting in the Mets pitching wise, Kodai Senga, as long as Senga is him, I have the confidence that the boys are going to go out and do that for sure. Not a doubt in my mind that they're going to go out and make that happen, everybody. So I would love to hear you guys how you feel right now when we're talking about Mr. Not just when we're talking about Juan Soto, but for anyone for that matter, however you guys are feeling, please drop it as always, folks. Then thank you so much for chiming in, hitting that like and subscribe button, as always, for our latest calm, cool, and collected WardyNYM postgame show. I can't be screaming my head off after every loss, guys. That isn't going to happen, especially when tonight they have themselves to blame. I would be a lot more frustrated if the Diamondbacks came out today and it looked like 10 times a better team, but they did not for a single second look like a team that the Mets can't handle. They just couldn't handle them because they shot themselves in the foot. And that is where everything stems from here. Mendoza cost this game with bad. I'm sorry, Joe, but I just wholeheartedly disagree. With the exception of Chris Davinsky for another inning, if you want to give that counter, then okay. I don't disagree with you there to a degree. But you can't put everything on the manager's shoulders when you don't hit for shit the entire ball game. That's what it comes down to. And same thing with Ryan Stanek. I know you guys are frustrated with Stanek, but remember the context of how the runs scored on him today. His fastball's flat. That's a problem. That's what we need to continue to work on it. But Stanek was not this guy that just looked like batting practice. If you understand the chopper, the broken bat double, and then their 2-out bloop oppo, the way that it did in Perdomo. Again, sometimes it just isn't going to go in your favor. And tonight's game reminded me a lot, and I mean a lot, of the 2022 Mets when they were winning ball games in ways that were not traditional or even sustainable. And that was with your bloops, your blasts, all those kind of things. Small ball play. That's what the Diamondbacks did better than the Mets today in this one. They had better small ball. They had their sacrifice flies. And the Mets looked more like, actually, the 2023 Mets, where they couldn't have a sac fly to save their life. The 2022 Mets, same applied to a degree. They couldn't get sac flies going even when their offense rolling. Thankfully, the Mets haven't had much of an issue on that front over the past year and a half now. But what we saw today was more of what I think we saw in years past. This is not indicative on what I think the Mets will be made out to be throughout a good chunk of this season. Just not their day today. Stephen B., thank you so much for the $2 haul. Steven says, I'm more worried about Vientos. Now, Steven, I'm really fascinated as to why you say that, and here's why. Mark Vientos has batted around 300 over his past 2 weeks of baseball being played. His slugging and OBP has been very solid. He's been hitting for more gap to gap. The power has been there, and we're seeing that on a pretty consistent level. Now, Vientos is not batting to the point where he's locked in and giving us 2 to 3 hits every single night, but he is producing pretty much every time out there as of late. So I'm curious as to why you are more concerned with Vientos, who's showing an upward swing in his production right now, versus how he started the year where he wasn't hitting like at all his first 2.5 weeks in the season. I was very happy with Brandon Waddell, Victor. Thanks for asking. I thought he was very sharp today in today's outing. I look forward to seeing more of him should the Mets keep him in their bullpen. GSU, trying to call out runners in scoring position over the past few years. Okay, you're one of every single Mets fan to say the exact same thing. I've screamed my head off in more games than I can count with Mets not hitting with runners in scoring position since I've started covering them in the beginning of the 2021 season. I know very well how it goes with them not hitting with the runners in scoring position. And it's been great to see the Mets have the run that they've had this year while they've had their fair share of runners in scoring position woes, because they've been carried in facets that is not in hand with them clicking on all full cylinders. But the problem that we saw with a game like today is that not only did they get exposed for not being able to hit with runners in scoring position, but they were also not able to combat that the way that they have otherwise with their balance of pitching and their power implementation that we've seen in recent games. Jacob, how are you, my man? Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate that. But folks, we are going to be wrapping up the show here in just the next minute or two. So before we get out of here, I would love to hear from you guys. What are your predictions for tomorrow's game between the Mets and the Diamondbacks here? Because you got Kodai Senga on the bump, Zach Gallen. I think that this is going to be a low-scoring offensive game similar to today. I hope the Mets win, obviously. I'm not going to give a full score prediction, but I do expect similarities to today where the offense is not going to be as high. I hope to be proven wrong. I hope the Mets win 10-0 tomorrow. But that's just my thoughts going from a night to a day game, especially after today was a bit of a frustrating loss. Raphael, I explained that earlier in the show regarding that. And I just spilled water all over my crotch, so that's a great sign to be wrapping this puppy up in a second, isn't it? This game was a ship show. I know you meant to say shit show, and that's okay, Michael. Let's see here. Mets 5-3, 3-2 Mets, 4-0 Mets, 3-2 Mets. Yeah, a lot of lower scores. 6-2 Mets, 5-3 Mets. Getting the predictions in the chat right now. Liz, have a great night. Thank you so much for chiming in. I appreciate that, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, thank you guys again, as always, for the support. Win, lose, or draw, we appreciate you. Soto's first home run at City tomorrow. Anthony, how many times do we have to try to call it until it comes to fruition? I'm dying out here. I really am. But, guys, thank you again. Greatly appreciate all the support here on the platform. The boys lose tonight, but if there's anything encouraging, it's the fact that all their losses as of late have been by 1 run, and they've been in the ball game every single time. So that's what I'll leave you with, folks. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. This is your guy